gentlemen, welcome to the fifth international conference. Thank you very much for having me today. Uh, it's a great honor to be with you. My name is Hamood ALRumhi from Sultanate of Oman, as a lecturer at Sultan Qaboos University and a PhD student at University of Leeds. Before I start, I really appreciate the organizing committee in this conference. I'm delighted to make you a short presentation about phonetic and phonological issues. My topic is the coherence and ordering of the phonetic and phonological topics in the introduction to the chapter on al-idgham in the classical Arabic grammatical treatises, methodological study. The main points are, first of all, introduction, next the sequence of topics, then results of analysis, last conclusion, and finally references. Let us start with introduction. This study seeks to shed light on the methodology of the classical Arabic grammatical treatises, particularly Sibawayh's book, with respect to the way they present the phonetic topics, as well as the evaluation of the coherence and consistency in each topic. This study examines the degree of balance and harmony of these phonetic topics presentation. The key question posed by this study are how integrated is the presentation of phonetic themes in the theoretical introduction to this chapter? What are the methodological principles adapted in these treatises for classifying the manners and places of articulation? And to what extent have articulatory, acoustic, and auditory phonetics influenced the development of the phonetic rules in the themes? Uh, when inspecting the methodology of these treatises in relation to phonetics, one notices that the arrangement of the topic is typically as follows: preface, number of Arabic consonants, acceptable and unacceptable allophones, numbers of places of articulation, including organs of speech, manners of articulation, a brief, uh, a brief summary. So let's start with the short preface of phonetic subjects included in some classical grammatical treatises comprises an introduction containing the headings of the phonetic topics discussed in these treatises. When considering the topics that are included in this introduction, one notices that their headings are as follows: numbers of consonants in Arabic, places of articulation, long and thin vowels, jahr and hams, and manners of articulation. It can be seen from these headings that some classical or some these treatises consider them to be of the main phonetic topics within which other phonetic subtopics are contained. So the methodology of these treatises for introducing phonetic studies can be summarized. Firstly, there's differences in the way of these treatises preface the topic of al-idgham. Some of them explain its conditions, al-idgham conditions and forms, without dealing with the basic phonetic topics. Others include an introduction with a list of consonants, contents of the phonetic topics that are going to be addressed within the section on al-idgham. Moreover, these treatises contain introductory chapters are characterized by brevity and what's that shortly. These the difference is clear between their methodology and contemporary phonetic studies, chiefly or mainly in the presentation of the introduction to the phonetic subjects. After introducing phonetic topics in some grammatical treatises, all of these treatises are consistent and arrangement of phonetic topics, starting with the number of Arabic consonants, which ancient Arab linguists referred to using the term al-huruf. Al-huruf. They what's that? It makes good sense for these treatises which start with the number of consonants to introduce phonetic by counting of consonants. Sibawayh considers that the number of consonants is 29, taking into account that alif is not spelled the same hamza. On the other hand, some grammarians considered the number of consonants to be only 28 because hamza and alif are spelled together as one letter. That is what the contemporary phonologists realized when they excluded the alif from the list of the consonants phonemes and classified it among the long vowels due to the clear distinction between these two sounds. I mean what? Alif and hamza in their spelling as well as in their places and manners of articulation. After an extensive discussion of the number of the Arabic consonants, these treatises clarified the phonetic variants of these consonants according to the way they were pronounced in various Arabic dialects. Variants of phonemes are referred to as allophones in contemporary phonetic terminology. According to the methodology of classical Arabic grammatical treatises, these allophones are divided in two types. The first one, acceptable allophones that are common in Arabic dialects and desirable in the recitation of the Holy Quran and Arabic poetry. And the second one, inacceptable and uncommon allophones in Arabic dialects that are undesirable in the recitation of the Holy Quran and Arabic poetry. According according to creation according to certain criteria and set conditions for mastering their pronunciation, these sounds should be considered divided in two categories according to their articulatory value in Arabic sounds. The creation of frequency of using in the speech of spoken Arabs, especially if this usage was found among Arab tribes living in the center of Arabian Peninsula. There are no written signs for these sounds in these treatises, which studied phonetic issues. Moreover, these treatises present no examples of these sounds to clarify the manner of their articulation within words, sentences, or in contextual structures. These treatises also stipulated oral performance to identify the pronunciation of these sounds. After giving details of the secondary sounds in Arabic in the chapter on ʔidɣa, these treatises discussed what's that the number of places of articulation in Arabic. Sibawayh classified what's that those who adapted Sibawayh's classification considered there to be 16 places of articulation, while some Arab linguists uh, argued that there were 14. taking L and an R to share a single of articulation. There was a third view adapted by some scholars of Tajweed who argued that there were 17 places of articulation in Arabic because they added the place of articulation called al-jawf, exactly for long vowels. Uh, these what's that? It can be decided. It can be what's that? These it can be deduced that the methodology of the classical Arabic grammatical treatises works can be summarized in this point. These treatises relied upon individual individual observation. Also, most these treatises agreed with Sibawayh in the number of places of articulation. The ancient Arab grammarians realized that there were that the number of sounds, exactly phonemes, in Arab is not equal to that of the places of articulation. Let's move to the places of articulation. The discussion of the number of places of articulation was associated with extensive details about these places of articulation in Arabic. The grammarians give the ancient grammarians give this topic particular attention since it's essential basis for the accurate pronunciation of the Arabic sounds. The overall methodology of the classical Arabic grammarians for studying the places of articulation can be considering. Sounds are divided between the pharynx, oral cavity, nasal cavity, tongue, teeth, and lips. The most important, they conducted a careful analysis of the movement of the tongue during the production of sounds whose place of articulation is found in the oral cavity. Also, spiritual directions are used to describe the positions of the places of articulation in order to determine the exact point of articulation. The presentation of the places of articulation in these treatises differs from that found in contemporary phonetic studies, the latter of which typically arrange them in descending order, starting with the lips and moving progressively back toward the larynx. These treatises, I mean classical Arabic grammatical treatises, by contrast, start with the deepest speech sounds, namely glottal sounds or aqsa al-halq, which they refer to the sounds. Aqsa al-halq means deepest point of the pharynx. Manners of articulation are mentioned after places of articulation in these treatises. Arab linguists realized that determining the place of articulation was not sufficient to describe the characteristics which distinguish one sound from another. Therefore, there is another element that contributes to describing the characteristics of the sounds. The topic include cultural issues in terms of the basic definitions of the manners of articulation and variety of methods for defining the manners, including both detailed and brief definitions. Despite the absence of titles and fundamental definitions, the manners of articulation are divided in two groups. So the first group includes jahr and hams, shiddah and rakhawa, itbaq and munfatiha and infitah. And we can also, they are called also majhura and mahmusa. شديدة ورخوة مطبقة ومنفتحة. The second group include what's that الانحراف for لام, تكرار for راء, غنة for نون and ميم, lean for الواء and ياء gliding, and صفير for sa, sa, za in Arabic. For that to what's that between the first group and second group, the second group, the method was presenting oppositional features in these treatises indicates that the ancient Arab grammars saw the first group of manners as general shared features based on opposing manners. Also, for the first group, the features distinguishing between uh, Jahr and Hems sounds have led to what's that? The feature obsing sounds in these treatises are not all of the same type. Also, it seems that the other presentation of these obsing manners in these treatises is done according to their level of importance. For the second group, uh, are explored more briefly that are manners in the first group. There are no headings separating these manners from the first group. Also, not all the manners in this group are subject to only one creation. Some are subcategory of abstracts and others of sonorants. The fact these manners are presented without separation has led to overlaps in definitions. And these treatises do not agree on the number of these manners. Some of them include what's that features of sound related to morphology, involving morphological rules, rather than phonetic and phonological aspects of the phonemes. Having include phonetic topics in the chapter of ʔidɣa, some treatises provide a brief summary of the section. These treatises explain the reasons behind the occurrence of ʔidɣam in terms of what is appropriate and inappropriate, approved and disapproved in sounds. Sibawayh mentions the sounds that are substituted by other sound during occurrence of idgham, as well as sound which are omitted. Siboy also gives 6 reasons in order in which they are cited in subsequent treatises. 6 reasons for this idgham chapter regarding phonetics and phonological issues. The what's that for last for what's that results of this analysis, we can conclude some what examines the methodology of classical Arabic grammatical treatises in the presentation, coherence and ordering this topic. First of all, these treatises adapted a general descriptive methodology in their presentation of phonetic studies. Secondly, this presentation of phonetic topics within the classical Arabic grammatical treatises was influenced by the methodology of Sibawayh's work. They mostly follow his phonetic terms and definitions. The third one, these treatises present the places of articulation in ascending order from the glottal sounds through to the labial sounds, as I mentioned before. Number 4, these treatises also uh, afford phonetic studies in a manner that predominantly demonstrate a logical hierarchy proceeding from a general topic, phonetic topic to a specific one, to a specific one. The last one, these the ancient Arab linguists were aware of the importance of a logical arrangement in the presentation of the manners of articulation. In conclusion, they classified the Arabic sounds into different categories based on specific criteria for each category. They draw up restrictions and rules on the quality of the sounds that permitted the construction of the rules of Arabic morphology in terms of the number, type, and arrangement of sounds in the structure of the word. Both the general and more technical linguistic terms that they developed to describe the places and manners of articulation became the most common and widely used in contemporary Arabic phonetic studies. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am willing to answer your question.